number one. It's a guideline so that we know how to assess, that we are consistent in our assessment. You know, when we take one of the students' work, we assess it the same way as we're going to assess the next student's work. It cannot be different. So it is, to some extent, we can call it like a guideline, right? And it must distinguish between performances, the different types of performances. And these performances can be products, something that they, you know, you give an assignment, a written assignment, they have to write something. Or you ask them to do a video presentation. So you're going to evaluate that video presentation. So those are products. But you may also want to assess processes, because processes are as important as product. Okay, because sometimes when it is group work, processes are important, because you want to see that everybody is engaged in the learning and everybody is participating. You know, you cannot have a bystander who's just riding along. You know, so this is not good. So then in that case, we want to focus on processes as well as product, not just on product. So I think this definition is quite a good definition. All right, it's a learning. It's not just an assessment tool. It's a learning tool. Okay, it articulates expectations. So what is your expectations of the product, of the processes that the students are going to go through? Okay, as part of the learning process or as part of the assessment of what they have acquired or that learned. So it is a learning and assessment tool that articulates the expectations for assignment or any task that we give by listing criteria. That means we give the criteria on how they will be assessed. And for each criteria, there is certain description of levels of quality. So for me, this definition actually captures the elements of a rubric. Okay. So according to Stevens and Levy, 2013, okay, I got this from the same source. So description of the task. So when you develop your rubric, you know, when you have a rubric, it must be accompanied with the description of the task. What is the task that you are going to assess? You can have a lengthy description of it, or you can have a very small description. So as long as there is a description so that whoever comes across the rubrics know what the rubric is for, okay? And then the second is the criteria or components that students are expected to demonstrate or perform. So these two things, you know, they relate to your learning outcome. Can they relate to the learning outcome? So deciding on the criteria. So what criteria do you have to include? Sometimes what happens is that we forget certain criteria and we feel that at the end, after the rubric is done, we say, oh, okay, I forgot this. So you have to really think about, you know, when you have your learning outcome, you have the course content, then when you decide on the assignment that you want to give your student, the task, okay? So you need to already think about what is it that you want to assess in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the skills that you want the students to develop, and maybe some other things like soft skills, like attitude, and also some Islamic values. So what are those things? All right. And then the third one is the levels of mastery. So this level of mastery, this is the rating scale, the scale, you know, not the rating scale, the scale. So the scale can be on a 3-point scale, where you say, you know, exceed expectation, meets expectation, or not meeting expectations. Or you can make it into a 5-point scale, or you can make it into a 10-point scale. Now, this also is a very important thing that we need to think about, okay, because this has to do with the precision of our measurement. It's also will tie to our grading, okay? And the last one, the description of the performance quality. I think this is one of the things that we spend a lot of time on, to describe the performance quality, because a scoring rubrics require a description of the performance quality at every point of the scale. It's not just you know, you can describe at one end and then the, you know, the not meeting and then meeting. All right. Okay. So, so this is an anatomy of the rubrics that you are all, I'm sure, very familiar with. Okay. So you have the levels. Sometimes some people, they put the highest level next to the performance attribute or the criteria, or you can put it on the other side. Whichever is easy for you. Okay, whichever is easy for you. So number one, what you're going to have is that you have the performance criteria. So these are the attributes or criteria that we want to assess. For example, in terms of content knowledge. Now, this is an example of a language task. All right, so it says content knowledge, pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary. So because of pronunciation, we know that this is an oral task. Okay. And then we have the levels of performance. So this is a 4-point scale. Now, sometimes some people prefer not to have a midpoint. Okay, so you have to decide where is, you know, when you look at this, you have to think about where's the passing point. Where's the pass point? All right, is it 2 the pass point or is it 3 the pass point? So what is the pass point? Now, after you have decided on the levels that you want to have, then comes the descriptors. Okay, come the descriptors. And the descriptors must be written very carefully, very objectively, and very clearly so that people can understand. Now, the levels of performance, you can use any of this depending on the task that you have given the students. Choose something which is appropriate. Now, for example, if you're talking about a formative assessment, okay, a formative assessment. So maybe you want to talk about in terms of mastery, then you can talk about emerging in terms of mastery or progressing. They have partial mastery or they have actually achieved, the mastery level. Or if you want to differentiate them being novice, intermediate, proficient, or distinguished level. So it depends on the purpose of the assessment. All right. Or let's say for another example for formative, needs improvement, meets expectation, exceeds expectation, so that the students know that, okay, actually I need improvement on this criteria. I'm not doing too well. All right. Or I'm okay here. So if I exceed expectation, maybe it could be an example for other students, you know. So you have to decide how to label your skill. How to label your skill. Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay. So when we talk about the performance descriptors, okay, and here, okay, the performance descriptors, the attributes. So what are the attributes? How do we decide what we want to put as part of the criteria? Okay, and how do we write? So when we write the descriptors, it must be based on certain set standards. Okay? So normally what happens in a scoring rubric is that the first thing that you have to write about is not the lowest level or the highest level. You write the level that the students are supposed to meet that standard. Okay, what is the minimum requirement for them to pass, the pass point? So whenever rubrics are designed, it is always recommended that you have to focus on the minimum standard first. What does it mean to be proficient and therefore pass the course? Okay. You must use quantifiable verbs. So because it is easy, if something that you can quantify rather than something that it is left very open. And you must be able to differentiate at different ability levels. So let's say, for example, if it says that you have on one end incorrect and the other end correct. So what can you put in between? Or you say if you say, you know, a few errors, and then at the other end, you would say no errors. So what would be in between? Okay. So it gives the students the what. That means what is it that they have to achieve, but not the how to do it. That is part of your instruction. Okay. Now, good performance descriptors also will have to be observable, something that you can observe, that you can actually see in the product, that you can actually see in the process. I also mentioned about quantifiable. It must be specific, not ambiguous, not too general, not too open. Okay. And use, of course, we are familiar with this. We use academic vocabulary. Now, usually we like to have some uniformity. If we use verbs at the beginning, we want to see verbs throughout, you know, just for consistency. If you use nouns, then you use nouns throughout. Let's say, for example, you want to say able to accomplish, okay? Or you say, what would be a good example of nouns? If you say meet expectations, so therefore that one is a verb. So you decide whether it's a verb or not. The noun thing is not coming to my head at the moment, my mind. Now, it must be objective, so that every time you evaluate it as much as possible objectively. And it's good to put positive expectations. Okay, positive expectations. You must, I mentioned already, product and process that you seek to evaluate. And of course, you must tie to the learning outcomes or the set standards. Now, this is an example of consistency of wordings. Now, if you look on the left-hand side, it says, what does it say? Level 1 describes a paper with incorrect citations. Okay. And level 4, it says it's a paper with complete citations. So incorrect citations actually would go with correct citations, not complete. All right. So if you look at on the right hand side, you see there is consistency in the use of words. All right. So it says few correct citations, some correct citations, many correct citations, and all correct citations. So we need to have some consistency in the writing of the wording of the descriptors. So you can either describe the amount, frequency, or intensity, but do not interchange. All right. So when it's consistent, it's a lot easier for anyone to use the rubrics, because you don't have to move from amount to frequency and then to intensity. So it's actually ease of using, and also along with this ease of using is also consistency in the grading. All right, so this is why it's important. And we are supposed to also avoid vague language. Okay? So for the performance level descriptors, number 1, you must cover the whole range of the performance. It must distinguish among levels. It must be descriptive. You must use labels to describe. Don't just say level 1, level 2, level 3. You need to have the labels. Okay. Now, it has to be clear, and you must center the target performance, okay, whether it's acceptable, mastery, or passing at the appropriate level. Okay. And then you must also feature parallel descriptions. Like in the example that I gave. This is parallel. On the right-hand side is parallel. On the left-hand side, it is not parallel. Because when it is parallel, it's a lot easier for people to focus on the things that they're supposed to look for. They don't have to go through all that language. Okay, so this is the reason why, this is recommended. Is everything okay? All right. So this is a typical example of a scoring rubrics. Okay, you see that the criteria are there. You have content, organization, completeness, documentation, delivery, interaction. So this is an oral presentation. Okay, an oral presentation, because we know that there is delivery there. And And the good thing about this is that it also has interaction. Okay, so it should not be like a one-way kind of thing. It's a two-way. All right, and then it has the performance level. You have beginning, developing, proficient, and mastery. So this is something which is typical that all of us have been using. So types of rubrics. Now, most of us are familiar with these rubrics, right? Holistic and analytic. But what about single point rubrics? Now, this is something that has come up in recent years. All right. So we are familiar with holistic, with analytic, but what are single point rubrics and how are they used? Okay. So this is an example: breakfast in bed, holistic rubric. So you have, performance level 1 up to 4. So you see that for holistic rubrics, all elements are put together. Okay, so it says that for a level 1, most of the food is cooked poorly, presentation is sloppy or unclean, recipient is uncomfortable most of the time. But in an analytic rubric, you find that these 3 elements have been broken up into 3 different criteria. Okay, so you have about food, and then about presentation, and then about comfort. Okay, now the thing about analytic rubric is that you find that it gives more description. It gives more description about what is expected at the exemplary level, or what is expected at least at the accomplished level. Okay, so this is the standard that we want for our student. At the end of the semester, we do not want developing. What we want is accomplished. They can exceed the standard, which is exemplary. So these are your A's. Okay, so this is an analytic rubric. But if you look at the next one, this is a single point rubric. Okay, a single point rubric where the focus is on the standards that you want to achieve. Okay, now if you look at this and the one before, under accomplished, all food is at the correct temperature, adequately seasoned and cooked to the eater's preference. Now here is the same, that's the standard for the performance. Okay, in terms of food, presentation, and also comfort. Now, why do people, why do some people actually use this kind of rubrics? All right. So this kind of rubric tells the student that this is the standard that I must achieve. So they focus on this only, that they must achieve this. Now, if they don't achieve this, what you can do is that you can put some comments under areas that need work. And if they have exceeded, then you can also put some remarks over there. Why is it that they have exceeded the standards that have been placed? Now, the good thing about the single point rubric is that it does not clutter the student's mind. Okay, it does not clutter the student's mind. It gives focus to both the instructor and also the students, that this is the standard that must be met. Okay, so anything above this, you would exceed. Okay, so with any rubrics, there, whether it is holistic, analytic, or single point, there are some advantages, some disadvantages, but the choice should be to meet the purpose of your assessment. What is it for? All right. So basically, single point rubric is actually to help students to have mastery of something. So it's more, for me, it is more for formative assessment, where you want to, you want the students to focus on getting certain skills or certain knowledge, and not to actually grade them. But for summative, now if you have, let's say, 200 students, sometimes it's difficult to use an analytic rubric. So you may go with a holistic rubric. So, but the trouble with holistic rubric is that it's not as reliable as an analytic rubric. So analytic rubric, because you are scoring the students on different elements, so your score will have a better chance to be more reliable than a single score using the holistic rubric. Okay, so other types of rubric. Just now we talked about whether it's holistic, it is analytic, or single point. Now, there are also rubrics that can be categorized as general rubrics or generic rubrics or task-specific rubrics. Now, if it is a generic rubrics, you can use it for different types of assessment tasks. Okay, different types of assessment tasks, as long as they actually cover similar aspects. Okay, so maybe you can have, as a general rubric, you talk about, instead of specifying the content, you just put content. And then you can put, something about critical thinking, or you can put delivery. So it can be used for a number of oral tasks, for example. It's not specific to one particular task, but you may also want to have it to be task specific. It means that it's only used for that particular assignment. Okay, so this one is more time consuming because for every assessment task that you have to develop. But the good thing about rubrics is that once you have a rubric, then you can always, tweak it. You can always adapt the rubrics that you have to suit your other assessment tasks. The next type of classification or types of rubric is that whether it is weighted or unweighted. Okay, unweighted means that the different criterion actually have equal weight, the same weight. Okay, if your rating, your scoring is from 1 to 5. For criterion 1, maximum score is 5. For criterion 2, maximum score is also 5. For criterion 3, maximum score is also 5. Weighted means that you assign different weights to different criteria. Because, if you're talking about a proposal, for example, a research proposal, do you want the methodology section to carry more weight? Would you want the problem statement to carry more weight? Would you want the literature review to have more weight? Okay, so we look at the importance of the different criteria, and we decide, whether we should give equal weight or should we give different weighting for the different criteria. So this is an example of same weight. Okay, this is an example of, this is my article review scoring rubrics. When I visit this, I see that, okay, actually I still have to work on it some more. Okay, now if you look at the score for every criteria, you find that the score here, let's say, the score for each criteria is scored out of 5 because the performance level is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this is equal weight. We're giving equal weight. But then when you look at this, you say that, okay, actually purpose, maybe I shouldn't give the same weight for purpose as I should for data analysis, because there's a lot of work that goes into a data analysis, and therefore I want to give more weight. So what I can do is that I can come up with a weighted rubrics. Okay, I can come up with a weighted rubrics where, let's say, problem statement and purpose, and also the theoretical framework, I give it a weight of 1. But for the review protocol itself, okay, selection and also data analysis, I give more weight. So I give the bulk of the weight actually is on data analysis procedure. So this is a weighted rubric. All right, this is a weighted rubric. So we have to decide, whether we want to use an equal weight rubric, an unweighted one, or a weighted rubric. So the other thing is that you have distinct categories or score range. So this is an example of a distinct category, just like this, a distinct category, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then here you have one representing poor, acceptable, admirable, exceptional. Okay, so they have very distinct categories. But you also can have a rubric that has score range. Okay, a score range. I don't like this kind of thing. I don't like rubrics that have score range, because what happens is that you have only one set of description, and that description is supposed to be 1 point or 2 points, or 3 or 4 points. So how do you decide? If you give a student a 3, so how do you describe that student's work? Okay. So even though there are some people who use score range, I personally do not like it, because how can you have 2 different points or 5 different points sharing the same description? To me, it is not very effective. It's not effective at all. So it is best to actually have one score for one description for one score. Then the users know, the lecturers who are using this rubrics know how to evaluate the students' work, and the students also know where he or she is at. Okay. All right. Now, how are rubrics different from rating scales and checklists? Now we know what checklists are. All right, checklist is whether achieve or not achieve. Usually it's a dichotomy. All right, yes or no. So checklist is easy to use. And I think checklist is very useful for, let's say, a formative kind of thing. And you have a rating scale. Now, if you look at the rating scale, you have the labels for that. That means you have the the description for the different levels, but it doesn't have descriptors. It doesn't have descriptors. All right. So this is a rating scale. So the difference between rubrics and rating scale is that rubrics have description. Okay, it has a description about every criteria and what is the level of attainment at that, for each of the criteria at each of the level. Okay, so this is, so does it mean that rating scales have no place in our assessment? No. Okay, we can use rating scales, we can use checklists. As I said, it depends on the purpose of our assessment, why we're doing the assessment, what kind of feedback are we going to give our students, how they are going to use the results that we're going to give them, how are we going to use the results, how are we going to report the results. Okay, so all this then determine whether we want to use rating scales, checklists, or scoring rubrics. Now you look at this. Notice an example. It says here, biology class laboratory report. All right. And it says it's an example rubric. Now, my question is that, is it a rubric or marking scheme? For us, for many of us, this is a marking scheme. It's not a rubric, because rubrics have certain characteristics, and these are the characteristics of the rubric. It has criteria, it has level of performances, it has descriptions to fit each criteria and each level of performance. Okay, so therefore, in our understanding, as practiced in the university, this is actually a marking scheme rather than a rubric. Okay, so does it mean that it is not useful? No. Okay, so because it depends on our purpose, why we want to use it, and for what reason. All right, so as long as we know, okay, this is how we're going to allocate the marks, and if they fulfill all these questions, therefore they get the marks that they deserve. Okay, now let's open to questions. Any questions so far?
Assalamualaikum, Doctor.
Waalaikumsalam pula. Sister Wanohana, how are you?
Yeah, Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
I have one basic question. Can we put 0 as the lowest score?
Can we put 0 as the lowest score? 0, the rubrics ni, dia ada a lot of approaches, you know. So there's nothing wrong to put 0. 0 means you don't submit. Okay, 0 means you don't submit or you did not complete the task. So actually it doesn't have to come inside in the rubric. Or let's say you have different criteria kan, katalah macam ni. Let's say for example, right? If you look at this, eye contact, body language, poise, enthusiasm, speaking skills, all these elements is something that it cannot be missing. You cannot have 0. But if you look at something like this, let's say you have problem statement, purpose, it's possible that the student did not write the purpose, right? In the review article. So you can start with 0 if you want. Let's say, for example, the student did not report the review protocols, how to conduct, how the review was conducted. So you can start with a 0 to say that it is not stated. Okay, so it's possible. But there are also people who say that your level 1 should be where, because there's this idea that when you give students assignment, they should be able to actually complete it. It's only completing at 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, or 90%. So for their scoring rubrics, they want to start at 50%, which is the pass point. So we decided, we know our courses, we know the kind of assessment tasks that we are giving our students. So we can imagine whether something can have a 0 or not. Okay, is that all right?
Okay, thank you, Prof.
Okay, yes. Any other questions? How's the pace? Is okay? Should I go faster?
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam. Yes, Sister Siti Fatimah.
Okay, I want to ask, is there any way to measure our effectiveness of our rubric?
You asked an interesting question. Now, when you develop your rubric, actually what you have to do is to test it out, before you actually apply the rubrics. So your rubrics can be something which is work in progress. All right, it can be work in progress. We of course, when we develop our rubrics, we try to cover all criteria, all important criteria. We try to come up with the most appropriate levels of performances. Let's say 1 to 5 or 1 to 6 or 1 to 4, and then we have to try it out. You have to try it out. So the first thing we have to do is actually to share it with a colleague. We give it to our colleague who is also familiar with the subject matter. All right, so let's say if I want to develop a research proposal rubrics, I can share it with anybody, because research proposal is something that all of us are familiar with. So I share it with a friend or a few colleagues and then get their feedback. Okay, what are elements that needs fixing and all that. So this is the first stage. This is the expert judgment evaluation. So the next stage is actually the empirical. We can test how the rubrics are working. Okay, in the Rush model, the Rush measurement model, the Rush model for which is called the many facets Rush model, it evaluates whether the categories are functioning properly or not. So there is a way, but not many people actually use this procedure. Okay, because you have to learn the statistics and also to actually know how to use the software. But this is one way. An easy way for us actually is just to try it out. Okay, when we evaluate students' assignment, we see whether the rubrics works, function the way that we imagine it would function. Now, if it doesn't, if you think that, okay, actually, I'm putting everybody in 4, I need to make it more to be able to distinguish the students even better, because I give this a 4, but this 4 and this 4, they're not the same. So I have to revise that. And if I find that, okay, this criterion actually, I don't want to actually put them together, I have to separate them. So then you do that as well. So once you develop your rubrics, it doesn't mean that you will keep it as it is. So there's always CQI, continuous quality improvement. You have to improve the quality, because at the end of it, what we are targeting is that we want to have accurate measurement of our students. We want to have precision of measurement. Kan? Kita tak nak penalize anyone just because our rubrics are not working. Does that answer your question, Dr. Siti?
Yes. One more thing. Can we just adopt and adapt from the
Yes.
from anyone's rubric?
Yeah, I think it is so far what I've seen is that nobody has put like a copyright on the rubrics, So it is something that is shared by people in education especially, and you can actually adopt entirely if it suits your assessment task. Exactly, or you can tweak it, you can adapt. Starting from scratch is not easy. Okay, so it's easier when you build upon what other people have done. I think as long as you acknowledge what your sources of reference, your references are, and people would appreciate that. Okay. Any other questions? Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
Shall I ask first? Okay. I've got one question regarding the assessment of the rubrics.
Mm-hmm.
So if we use like RASH or if we are assessing the discrimination index or the difficulty index, so are we treating the whole rubric as one item, or?
We will treat in the RASH analysis. We will treat, let's say in this example on the screen, we have how many criteria? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 criteria. So each criteria can be assessed individually. So in the RASH analysis, we can look at the rubric as a whole, and we can also look at the different criteria independently, and we can then evaluate. Yes.
Okay.
Doctor, from which kuliah, please?
From Com.
Oh yeah, I met you?
Yes. During the BTMC.
Yes, I am going to set up a SIG, special interest group, inshallah. It's one of
inshallah,
my
inshallah.
Inshallah. So I shall inshallah make an announcement. So to train pelapis-pelapis yang ada minat with this kind of more technical way to evaluate, inshallah. Any other questions? Yes, thank you so much. Yes. Any other questions?
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
I just want to ask you about the soft skill. If you want to include the assessment on the soft skills, for example, the analytical skill, thinking, or the communication skill, because that one is stated in the course outline. Right, Prof. So how can we include in this, for example, analytic rubric and the score? Can it be double? I mean, maybe there are 2 criteria or category for that assess critical. I mean, the soft skill. Sorry.
Yeah. In my example later, I will show how from my learning outcome, I translate it to a task, assessment task, and then how it should look like in a scoring rubric. Not a full scoring rubric, but the elements are there. Okay, so of course, macam kita kan, let's say, the important thing is that what gets assessed actually gets learned. If we don't assess, number one is that students don't pay attention to it. We also don't pay attention to it. And then we have no way of reporting, okay, that this thing is actually taught and the students have learned and at what level they have achieved. So if we have to include those things in the rubrics, okay, so we have, let's say, all the soft skills. We also have, values. So soft skills macam teamwork also ada value kan. If let's say, for example, that the fact that every team member actually participated or actually put in their effort, so that is also an aspect of amanah in carrying out our responsibility. So we can actually word it in a way that students see that, oh, okay, this value is very important for this course, that the lecturers are actually putting emphasis on it, So this is how we also teach our children, right? When we teach our children values, we teach our children, how they should behave and all those things. So in the same way, when we do our assessment task, we have to think about all these things. And we have to think about what kind of assessment task that can demonstrate whether they are doing or having these values or not. And then in our rubrics, we incorporate so that they know, it's something like, some people say that maybe, they fake it, or the thing with, even if you look at Salat, right? For young children, you ask them to Salat, they play, they don't understand the spirit behind it. But as they do that ritual, and as they, they grow up, they begin to understand and they begin to internalize the value. So if we look at it from that spirit, that we are not assessing them, what do you call that? So that they become hypocrites or whatever. No, we are trying to develop that behavior. So in your scoring rubrics, you may not want to put any score for it at all. But you can say that, all right, now this is for your self-assessment, your self-evaluation. Okay, so it's up to you whether it's going to be scored or not. Let's say macam kalau if you talk about soft skills, of course, because it comes together with your learning outcome. So you have to evaluate. And so afterwards, I have one example where from the learning outcome, I identified whether this is a cognitive, affective, psychomotor, what sort of soft skill, and then what sort of assessment tasks is suitable for it, and then what should be in the scoring rubrics, inshallah. And the last small session, inshallah. And
Thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah,
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
I want to ask you about the holistic rubric. Based on the example that you have shown just now. For example, if the student get 4 score, all food is perfectly cooked, presentation surpass expectations, and recipient is kept exceptionally comfortable throughout the meal. Okay, everything is good, but except for one criteria, the student did not fulfill the number 3, for example. It's not comfortable. It's not exceptionally comfortable. It is comfortable, but not exceptionally comfortable. Can it be still under 4 score or?
So this is the difficulty, right? So what do lecturers do? They go with 3.5.
Oh,
or they go with 3.25. This is why this is one of the disadvantages of holistic rubrics. Okay, this is one of the disadvantages of holistic rubric. That's why some people prefer to break it up. because you're not sure for each dimension, let's say about the whether it's cooked or not, the quality of the food, and then the presentation and the comfort, they may not come together. For example, a very good example is ESL students. Now, ESL students, we know that, when we ask our students to write English as second language learners, we ask them to write essays. They have good ideas, they can organize their ideas, but their language actually, is far below that. So would you use a holistic rubric or would you use an analytic rubric for that? Because there is unequal development in the different criteria. So this is why, before you decide on the rubric, you've got to know that will they all come together or not? Let's say the cooking, the presentation, the comfort, because one of those elements may not be met. And then you will have to decide whether should I give a 4, should I give a 3? If I give a 3, but the meal is, is cooked correctly and is well presented, it's just that it was not comfortable for the recipient. So what do? Do I put it at 3.5? But on the scale, there is no 3.5. So this sort of things, actually, if you have more than one rater, more than one examiner, it's going to cause problems because different examiners are going to interpret this differently. So the choice is not a holistic rubric, but an analytic rubric. Now, for language, a common practice for language is that they adopt both. All right, so they go with a holistic rubric because they say that we need to look at the product as a whole. Okay, as a whole, is it okay or not? Is it well written? Does it say what it's supposed to say and everything? And then they go with a second marking, which they look at the analytic rubrics at the different dimension and go one by one. And then they take the mean, the average of these two scores. So this is another strategy. Okay. All right. Any other questions?
Thank you, Prof.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Shall we go on to the next one? And then maybe we'll take a longer break in between. Yeah? Okay. All right. So this is about rubrics. Okay. Purpose of using rubrics, and then whether it's formative or summative, and we talk a little bit about.
Assalamu alaikum, Professor.
Yes.
I just write one question on chatting if you can answer me.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Is it possible to evaluate an item based on the trust of the student? Example, if we give an assignment, part of this assignment, there is a recitation of the Quran, one portion of the Quran, but he has to go to analyze and to write down a note and discuss, analyze. So the recitation of the Quran itself is, we'll give example 5 marks, but the student will not recite in front of us. So we just take the statement from the student. Is it possible to do that, or is it not possible?
I think, that one is about more towards self-assessment, how they self-evaluate. But what you can do is that you can give them an exemplar. An exemplar is an example. You say that, okay, for this verse or these verses, this is the correct recitation. And these are the different ways of reciting, right? Because recitation also has a number of ways that you can recite. So you tell them that if you recite something like this, then you can give yourself this score. If you make, let's say, 3 mistakes or 5 mistakes or something like that, then it will be this particular rating that you give yourself. So, and so on. Now, the advantage of this is that we do not want, it's just like salat, right? Salat, we want it to come from inside, that we want to perform the salat, that we want to do our best. It's actually, I think, one of the best way to develop honesty, integrity in a person. We tell them that this is the thing, and that, whatever that you do, that you have to be responsible for it, that you know, that no one, I'm not watching you, but you are responsible for yourself. And I think for students at university, you know, these are amanah, you know, this is the sifat of amanah, and then about goal setting, about knowing where they are, self-reflection. I think this is important. I think that mechanism about them evaluating themselves, I think in terms of the approach is a very good approach. But I think we need to provide them with some guidelines. Okay, so this is the guideline. You do the self-evaluation, this is what it is. Is that okay, Doctor?
Yeah, I really appreciate your answer. Alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khair. But just another detail. So
Yes.
the recitation, we ask them to recite not for the purpose of reciting properly, because this student, they already know how to recite. So we want them to read to understand, because before they write any note,
Yeah.
they have to read.
Yeah.
So this,
if that is the case, that actually the recitation shouldn't carry any marks, because that's not what you want to assess. What you want to assess is their understanding of those verses, of those ayah, right? So whether they have understood, whether they know the correct interpretation. So therefore, the recitation actually is like everybody is going to get all the same marks.
no,
So
because the purpose of giving this portion is to create among the students, to help them to create a habit of reciting the daily of the Quran. So there is another soft.
yeah, okay, all right. But I would suggest that, you know, you also give not many marks, right?
Not many, only just to appetizer, you know, just to
Yes, yeah, just to appreciate them
appreciate and motivate, yeah.
and encourage. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, not a problem, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair, Ustaz.
Barakallah. So can we proceed? Purpose of using rubrics, all right? So now, you know, we've been doing this performance assessment, alternative assessment for years. But when the MCO came in with the COVID pandemic, everybody's talking about alternative assessment as if we have never been doing it. I actually am quite unhappy with those kind of remarks, you know, that, you know, we have to teach our lecturers to do alternative assessment and not just final exam, and, you know, not just midterm exam. You can hear the irritation in my voice, I suppose. Now, for me, when we talk about assessment methods, the tasks that we develop, they all have their own purposes. They have their own purposes, have their own aims, and one particular type of assessment method may not be suitable for a purpose that we have. So final examination has its purpose. Midterm also has its purposes, you know. Alternative assessment also has its own purposes. And of course, alternative assessment can be used in a formative way for learning, mainly for learning, so assessment for learning, but it can also be used as assessment of learning to look at what has been attained, because alternative assessment do have some very good characteristics that allow us to see students' knowledge, skills, and also ability, okay? The thing about alternative assessment or performance, alternative assessments fall under the umbrella of performance assessment. Performance assessment means that the students are required to perform something. So the performance can be an oral presentation, it can be a written assignment, it can be, you know, building a model, a house, building something, creating something. So this is performance assessment. So even writing an essay is also a performance assessment. Okay, it's not considered as an alternative assessment because it's a type of assessment that has been used for many years, but still it is a performance assessment because students have to perform the task. Okay, and one of the characteristics of performance assessment or alternative assessment is that you have to use multiple skills, different sources of knowledge and multiple skill. Okay? So in performance assessment, also alternative assessment by default, you have certain elements. Okay, certain elements. Number one is the examiner, the student who's performing the task. Okay, the instrument is the assessment task that you ask him or her to do. So one student, let's say for example, Ahmed is writing and is reviewing 4 or 5 articles. So that is the instrument, the writing task. And from this, he will produce a performance. So his written assignment, that is the performance. And this performance has to be graded by a rater or examiner. And how does the rater or examiner grade the performance? Is by using a scale, which is the scoring rubrics. Okay. And from that, the student will get a score or a rating. So you see that, in performance assessment, alternative assessment, the trouble when you have multiple rater is that you may have disagreement about, what score to give. Someone say that this is good, someone say no, it's just average, So this is why for performance assessment, alternative assessment, when you have multiple raters, multiple examiners, you must have a standardization exercise. Okay, you look at you mark some assignments together and decide, okay, this is an A paper, this is a B paper, this is a C paper, and everything else is somewhere in between. Okay, so you have benchmarks. All right, so when you have scoring rubrics, it's a scoring guide for the examiner to ensure that the validity of the scores that they give the students and the reliability. So that is fairness in assessment. So this is the purpose of using scoring rubrics. Okay, so that you can evaluate all the important things that need to be evaluated and reliably score for every student that has performed that particular assessment task. Okay. And the only thing that we have to do if we are a single examiner, we have to be consistent with ourselves. Now, I'm pretty sure that you felt the same way that I have. Sometimes when I mark the students' answers, and I find that, okay, actually this particular answer is actually better than the one before, but I actually gave the one before a higher score. So I have to revise that. Okay, so this happens to us sometimes, right? So this is what we call internal consistency. So we have to be internally consistent with ourselves, that when we are scoring, we are maintaining the same standards. So if your scoring rubrics can help you to do that, then you have a good scoring. Okay, so this is number one. This is the context of use. Now, rubrics are meant to, as I mentioned earlier, is to establish expectation of the performance. What is expected? What should be the minimum level? So this is why some people use that single point rubrics, because they want the students to focus on that. Okay, different people have different approaches to it. The second is about transparency of evaluation, so that your students know this is how they are being evaluated. And everybody is being evaluated using the same yardstick. Everyone is measured using the same ruler. Okay. It also serves as a guide to the work that will be addressed. So they know that they will be assessed on all these things. Okay. When we talk about constructive alignment, we always talk about the learning outcome, the instruction, and then the assessment. Actually, students look at the assessment first. They don't look at the learning outcome or the instruction. Their main concern is the assessment. All right. So by looking at the scoring rubrics, the assessment task, then they know that this is the thing that I have to work on, and I must reach this particular level. I must learn these things. Okay. So it also set the standards for the students to achieve. So they know that if I don't achieve this proficient level, therefore I don't deserve to get the marks that I would want to get. Okay. And it also helps us, as I mentioned, to measure performance adequately, accurately, and most important, one of the most important thing is the feedback. Now, sometimes what happens is that we give the assignment at the end of the semester. That's supposed to be our final assessment. Okay, so final assessment, namanya assessment. Okay, final assessment. Final assessment means the last assessment that you're going to give. Hence the word final, right? Now the assessment can take many forms. It can be a sit-in final exam. It can be a take-home open book examination. It can be a sit-in open book examination. It can be a set of quizzes. It can be one project. It can be many things. But its purpose, that is the last assignment that you're giving your student. Okay. Now, as a final assessment, usually the students will submit perhaps sometimes the last day of class, or maybe 1 week before class ends. So what opportunity do you have actually to give them the feedback? So in this way, your rubrics, you're actually using it more as a summative assessment rather than for a formative assessment. Okay, so but still you can give the feedback if you want to. You can give it to them because it would be very useful for them. But the thing is that's why, when you have certain assignments, you want students to get feedback, then you have to time your assignment properly so that they have time to get that feedback and time to actually to improve. Okay, so maybe for the rubrics as a summative, it doesn't have to be as detailed as a rubric that is used formatively. Because what you want to do is you want to grade. All right. But let's say if the project is a big project, it carries about 40% or 50%, you may want to look at the students' work at different points, right? At the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. So you give them the scoring rubrics. So you can say, okay, let me see. You can also capture the processes. And you can say, okay, let me see. In terms of the processes, okay, you have met this. These are all okay. All right. And this one, C, D, and F, you need to work more. Okay, so that you can actually meet the standard that we have set. All right. So the rubrics is actually, is actually to give feedback. So if the rubrics is meant to be used summatively just for grading, it doesn't have to be as detailed. All right. But still, it requires some details so that you can mark reliably and validly all the students' assignments. Okay. So the other thing is that it is very important. We are talking about andragogy, talking about pedagogical approaches for adults. So one of the main concern is about metacognition development. Okay, metacognitive development. It's not just for university students, but also for school children, actually. It is for them to set goals, goal setting, to help to encourage high performance, is for them to use for self-assessment. So when they do self-assessment, then they are aware of their own learning strategies, whether they are doing fine or not, whether they should make some adjustments, They can then think critically about their learning and attainment. And also, I think what is important is about self-responsibility. So this is why sometimes you can make your scoring rubrics to do all these things. To do all these things. And of course, you have to explain to the students that this is, this is what I imagine that you can be. And these assessment tasks are meant to develop this particular, for you to demonstrate your knowledge at this particular level, for you to demonstrate your skill and for you to also, evaluate yourself and see where you're going. So this is why rubrics are important. Now, I like this, what this person said. If I was to simply circle boxes on the rubric and give it back to an assignment, now this one is more like, you don't actually give verbal feedback, you don't discuss, but still it is better than giving a letter grade because students actually do get some feedback, all right? But if you just circle boxes, and the description is very little, then it is more of a summative rather than a formative. So we need to make sure that students do get feedback. That's why you work so hard on the scoring rubrics. And I like this. So what do your rubrics tell your students? I like this one really, that every time you make a rubric, you articulate your educational philosophy. What is it that you want to develop in them? What is it that you want them to have at the end of the course? Okay? So this is why we need to tie it into our Sejahtera academic framework, the values that we want our students to develop and to have. And of course, it must be tied to our learning outcome. Now, the philosophy of the university, the mission and vision of the university is very obvious about Islamic values. Okay, so when we teach our students, we teach them, things that come from the West, that from the point of view of the Maqasid al-Shari'ah, for example, the point of view of the national education philosophy, the point of view of the Quran and Sunnah. So how do you assess the learning? Okay, so all these things will be articulated in your scoring rubrics. Okay, if your scoring rubric is just about assessing knowledge, that's what they're going to learn. They're not going to learn more than that. Okay, so your scoring rubric should indicate where you want them to go and how you want them to get there. Okay. So just now, Sister Dr. Zul Mahiran, talk about values, soft skills. Okay. So if it is part of your learning outcome, even if it is not part of the learning outcome, and you think that these skills are important for students to have, you can include in your scoring rubrics. But of course, you cannot put a lot of weight on it if it's not part of your learning outcome. Yeah? If it is a part of your learning outcome, then you can put weight on it. And how much weight, actually, it depends, because different weight would affect the total score. Now, the total score that the students are going to get, let's say the total score is 100, is that the criterion on soft skills, is it going to contribute 50%? Is it going to contribute 10%? Is it going to contribute 60%? So how much would the contribution of that element is going to be on the total score? So you have to think about that. So that's why when we talk about weighted rubrics, we have to think about, now for this assessment task, what are the skills that I want to evaluate? What are the aspects of knowledge that I want to evaluate? So how much weight should I give to these different elements? Now, I do want to also develop soft skills, but how much weight should I give to soft skills that would actually contribute to the total score? So always think about how the different criteria are going to contribute to the total score. Because sometimes it does not deserve, let's say, 50%. It only deserves 10%, for example. Okay, so you have to identify and you have to develop. And of course, the Sejahtera academic framework, now people, everybody, I think, I don't find anyone in the university actually don't believe the utility of the national philosophy of education, who don't believe the importance of Islamization, about how to view life or lineage or wealth or knowledge from the Islamic perspective. And the thing is that, you know, we want to have students who understand these things, who have good values. So if we only do it in the instruction, but we do not follow through in the assessment, then maybe the students may not see the importance of it. Okay, so it is important for us to actually incorporate, you know, elements of the SAF into the scoring rubrics. Now, there are some people, you know, who are not with the SDG, you know, because I think primarily because it came from UNESCO, that and some of the things like equality, you know, gender equality is gender equality in Islam is very different from gender equality from the Western perspective. So for some reasons, you know, some of the things are not well accepted. Now, what people have come up with, we can always see it from the point of view of Islam, and of course, Islam being the right religion, we can, you know, explain to the students. But the thing is that, you know, learning to live together is an important concept, because Islam also teaches us to respect others, and hopefully, you know, when we have the right practices, people will see how beautiful Islam is, and would want to know more about Islam, and you know, be engaged with Muslims, and who knows, Allah SWT might give them hidayah, you know, to become one of our part of the Muslim Ummah. So these are things that are important. You know, like we have nowadays we see lots of people, students who don't care about other people, not having the right values, you know. So we need to address these things, and we need to actually, this is why the value-based education is very important. It's not just about knowledge or skill. People need, you know, worldly knowledge to live, you know, in this world, but values are something that is important. So we really have to incorporate this as part of our assessment and also in the scoring rubrics. Okay. So this is the second session. Maybe I can move on a little bit on this one, just to continue. So as I mentioned just now, does your scoring rubric do what it is supposed to do? Now, if you look at this illustration, you know, this image is very interesting. Now, the problem is with the object that we are assessing, or with the evaluation tool, with the tool. Okay. Now, sometimes the tool that we are using don't fit, you know, don't fit what we want to evaluate. So we have to make sure, we have to evaluate our rubrics, make sure that our evaluation tool actually meets its purpose. All right, meets its purpose and does its job. So when we talk about the purpose of assessment, we have to think about a few things. Number one, is it formative or summative? Is it assessment of learning or for learning? All right, which one? If it is for learning, it means that it should be part of the learning process. All right, and students must get feedback from the scoring rubrics that we use. Now, is the assessment high stakes or low stakes? Okay, high stakes mean that they cannot move on to the next year, they can fail the course. They cannot get jobs, for example. Okay, so this is very high stakes. So if your test is very high stakes, then you need to make sure that you are measuring as precisely as possible, because you do not want to make a mistake. You do not want to fail anybody who don't deserve to fail, and you do not want to pass anybody who don't deserve to pass. And you don't want to give a person an A if the person is not deserving. All right. So you have also to think about the classification of students. Is this course a pass-fail course? If it is a pass-fail course, you can come up with a single point rubric and say that, okay, if they meet this particular standard, if they meet this standard, therefore they pass. So it doesn't matter whether they pass at Proficient or whether they exceed expectation. It doesn't matter, because all you're interested in is that pass or fail. All right. Now, when the MCO was announced, what happened is that people say, okay, now we can't, because we're not going to have final examination, we're not going to have midterm quizzes, and we can't have, all these assessments that we've been having. Therefore, we're not able to measure accurately. So this is why many institutions move from grades, the grading system, the A minus, B plus, and so on. This is why they move from this to the pass-fail. It's simply because they feel that with the kind of assessment that they have, with the instruction, the delivery that is open to them, that students may not be learning properly, that the assessment cannot be done properly also. Therefore, we cannot support giving different grades, having that fine distinctions of different levels of ability, okay? Because if you want to give students from A to F, you need to have a very long scale, and you need to have very distinct level of performance. But if you only have pass or fail, all you need is that you have a midpoint, everybody on this side fails, everybody on the other side passes. Okay, so this is something that we have to think about when we want to develop our scoring rubrics, the classification of the students. And we have to think about, we have to understand the students also. Yesterday, Prof. Aris mentioned that in our meeting on assessment, he said that if all the students deserve an A, therefore we should give them an A. It shouldn't be on a bell curve. It shouldn't be only 10% with A if everybody deserves A. So your students, whether they are homogeneous or whether they are heterogeneous. Okay. Now, at the same time, when we talk about grades, okay, it has to do with certification. It has to do with, selection in the workforce and so on. So if everybody gets an A, how are you going to differentiate their level of performance? So this is why the grades are there, to have that ranking, It's not just a pass or fail, all right? And then, are you talking about equal development across the criteria, as I mentioned, like the holistic one? What if one of the elements in one of the level for the holistic rubric is not met? Okay, so you cannot use a holistic rubric. You have to use an analytic rubric. Okay? And then you said summative or formative. So this will tell you how detailed your description should be. Okay? At the end of the day, when we talk about assessment, we talk about assessment for learning. That means we want to help students learn. And more importantly, we always use assessment to actually give us information about what students have attained and what they have not attained. Therefore, precision in measurement is very important. We don't think very much about it. But in medicine, for example, or in dentistry, precision is very important, because if you say that this person has qualified and therefore can practice as a doctor, you want to make sure that you are protecting the public, that this person is not going to do anything wrong. So this is why it's important. for some disciplines, it doesn't matter too much, right? Now, let's say, you know, if a teacher makes a mistake about an English pronunciation, it doesn't matter too much. All right, it doesn't matter too much. So therefore, we say that, all right, in the assessment, if it's not so precise, it's not going to kill anybody. Right? But still, we have to be fair. And to be fair, we have to be precise in our measurement. So we have to pay attention to these things. So why is it important to be precise? If you're not precise, you may end up going somewhere else, you know, instead of where you want to go. You may end up, you know, your house may be lopsided and a bridge cannot, you know, stand the way it's supposed to stand so that people can safely cross, cross the bridge. So precision actually in measurement is very important. And we do not want to make misclassification errors. We do not want to say that the student is a failure when the student is not, and we want to give the student the grade that the student deserves. So we don't want to have false negatives or false positives. This is very important. Okay. I think this is also why, you know, in the professional courses, professional programs, the accreditation bodies are very particular about, you know, about the curriculum. They are also very particular about the delivery of the instruction and also about the assessment, you know, because it matters. All right. Certification is a big deal. Now, precision in measurement. Now you have two rulers, A and B. Now, A will give you more precise measurement compared to B, right? Because it has more scales, this minor scale points. Okay, so if you use B, you may not be able to differentiate your students as precisely as you use scale A. So the point that I'm trying to put across is that when you have different scale points, it's going to affect your measurement. A 5-point scale, a 7-point scale, a 20-point scale will actually affect. Okay. Now, you will also be thinking, how many levels should I have? You know, is it too many or is it too few? All right. And there's also this opinion that says that using a long scale would make it harder to justify small differences. But for me, using a long scale can help us with the grading. Okay, with the grading, you know, the A, B, C, D. Because you don't only have 4 categories. You don't only have A, B, C, D, E, and F. You don't have 5 categories. You have A minus, B plus, B minus, C plus, C. You have a C minus, no, right? And then D minus, and then E, F, and so on. You see how many different categories we have. And we have to be able to differentiate the students into these different categories. Okay, so we need to make sure that our scale is long enough or fine enough to capture those differences. So it's also like students, you know, if you look at hurdles, the hurdles are the same height, right? Because they want to test their ability to run and jump and cross those hurdles. So the hurdles has to be the same height for everybody. So that this is why, you know, when we talk about exam questions, we discourage lecturers from giving choices. I say you have 4 questions, you say answer any 2 of the questions. No, everybody must go through the same, you know, must jump over the same hurdle, must be given the same task. But how fast, you know, how fast they can jump the hurdle, who gets to the finish line first, that matters. Okay, the same way, you know, all this, if you look at, you know, people who participate in cycling, for example, they're all good cyclists. All right. But what's the purpose? You want to find the best the top 3, the top 5, the top 10. All right. So sometimes in our assessment, that can also be a purpose. We want to rank. Who are the A's, who are the B's, who are the C's, and all that. But we know that all of them have achieved some sort of minimum level. This is why for the rating scale, sometimes it doesn't have to start from 0. It can start from 40%, or it can start from 50%. Let's say your passing mark is 50%. You can start at 50%. And you say that if you don't meet any of this, therefore you fail. So the 0 to 40% is somewhere on this end, which is not described. You only describe the 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%, and 100%. Okay, so your rating scale can also look like that. But if you come up with something like that, you have to have very clear justifications why you have developed your rubric the way it is. And you must be able to justify that it works. Okay. All right, so this is an example about how the different score points are going to affect how students are differentiated. Now, let's say you have a 5-point scale, which is at the top. Okay, so most students will be clustered into larger groups. But if you make it from a 5-point scale, you go down here to a 10-point scale, you find that you can better differentiate the students. And then you can put them according to your scoring, our grading criteria. Okay, more easily, and more comfortably. All right. And then you also have to then decide which rubrics. As I mentioned, it depends on the purpose of assessment. Is it going to be summative for grading, primarily for grading, or is it going to be formative for feedback? So why is it for? I don't suggest the scoring. Okay. This is an example of a conventional technical design rubric. Oh, why is it stopped? Yes. This is a rubric that I want to show you. Okay. To me, I call it a hybrid. Okay, I call it a hybrid because Dr. Mira, help. How do I come up from this? Okay.
Which one, Prof? Sorry.
Dr. Mira dah dapat.
Okay.
I wanted to exit the slideshow because I want to show the rubrics more clearly. Kenapa? I punya ni banyaknya. So shy. Mana Okay, here. This one is an example of that I found on the net. Interesting. It is called a versatile guide and rubric to scaffold. And so to say the word scaffold, scaffold is to assist in the learning and assess engineering design projects. Now, some projects, they are very big projects because they carry a lot of weight. Okay, let's say we give, 50%, even 40%, I think is quite a big chunk, of total score to give. So 60%, or it might be, maybe that everything actually hang on this one particular project. So you need to make sure that it's well described, the task fully understood by the students, and also how they are going to be evaluated, and the rubrics itself. The rubric itself has to be very comprehensive. Okay. Now in this example, this is why we need to look at what our friends are doing in the different disciplines. So this is part of the curriculum. This is the curriculum. So they have this engineering design. So this is the focus. Okay. They have engineering design 1, design 2, up to design 6 in year 4. So there's an explanation about it. What I want to highlight is this is the development of design process guide. Okay. All right. So these are elements that students have to perform and they will be assessed. Number 1 is the planning of the project. and information gathering. 2 is about the concept generation, okay, evaluation and selection of what concept they want to use, the design itself, the testing and refinement. So you can actually apply this to scoring rubric development also. So you see that it has the different stages, right? The different stages. This semester 1, semester 2, 3, 4. So these are the different elements. So the first one is the project plan and mission statement. And then you have the stakeholder assessment and market analysis and so on. Okay. And how it is translated into a rubric. Let's say this is the example on the first part about project plan and mission statement. Can you see it's a 4-point scale? The lowest is that no project plan and mission. At the most accomplished end, project plan and mission presented and used as an overarching guide. The second one is about stakeholder assessment and market analysis. And third, so you see how the different elements of the project, of the assessment, or the task that they're supposed to perform, and the rubrics that follow. Okay, and then and also they also specify what are the things that students have to use, what knowledge they have to use. So when they're talking about planning and information gathering, they also identify the tools that the students have to use. They have to use a Gantt chart to show the project plan, budget, for stakeholder assessment, what are the customer needs, the stakeholder analysis, the market analysis, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, let's look at the rubrics. Rubrics is very comprehensive, very nice, actually, because there's a lot of thought that actually have gone into how the students should report, and also how the students should.
Sorry, Prof. Sometimes your voice is a bit unclear.
Sorry. So tak apa, yang tu tak dengar tak apa. Okay. So anyway, this is the engineering capstone project, right? Now you see on one end, these are the criteria. What are the aspects that will be evaluated? And on the other end, these are all the descriptors about the level of performances that they're supposed to attain. As I mentioned, these are the things that the knowledge or the things that the students have been taught that they have to use at the different stages. Now, mana dia punya rubrics yang tu? Oh, dia tak ada kat sini. Okay. The rubrics is actually in my I hope you can see this. Boleh nampak tak? It's very tiny. Can you see? I learned this from Mira. How to make it large. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So you see, the first part of the rubric, it has a 4-point scale and it has descriptors. But as you go to this side, can you see here? It says applied concepts learned. So they actually identify the different concepts that the students are supposed to apply. And here it says to evaluate what is it that they actually use, what is it that they should have or could have used. So this can actually be used as part of the process. In the learning process, they can actually evaluate. Let's say, in the middle of the project, okay, this is what they have done. Okay, this is how you are evaluated. So this can be not a final evaluation. Okay? Now, as you go down to the third part, okay, the way I see is that this the first part of the break, this is the second part, and then this is the third part. Now you see how it changed. Instead of descriptors, now the person have written it in a form of questions. So in terms of economic, have economic implications of proposed solution or process changes been considered? Now, is this acceptable? Is this acceptable? Manufacturability, what is the impact? It's quite possible that, you cannot fully describe, or you cannot have a very detailed description for certain elements. So for me personally, there's nothing wrong, because at the end of it is that you want to see what you want to evaluate the product, whatever that the student is doing. So it can be as a rating scale, it can be a marking scheme, it can be a scoring rubric. Okay, but what is important is that you cover all elements that you are supposed to cover. That if you evaluate the student's work, you evaluate in a comprehensive manner. You don't miss out anything. Because if you miss out anything, then you are not covering the whole curriculum or the whole syllabus. Okay, so you find here, it goes back to the description. Okay, it goes back to the description. But what I want you to see is that how comprehensive it is. Now, for a capstone project, this is a final year project. The credit, proper credit unit, about 6 credit units, right? Sometimes it's 2 semesters, so it can carry 6 credit units, 12 credit units if it's for master's project or something like that. So when you have very detailed rubrics, it helps you to give a proper evaluation of the student's work. So this is important. This is something that we cannot gloss over. We need to really consider. Okay. So I will stop here now. Before I go on how to design, any questions? What do you think about this rubric? Would you use something like this? Anyone? Am I still with you?
Yes, Prof.
Good.
Yes, Prof.
Yes, we are still here.
Okay, because maybe I thought maybe my internet connection, suddenly stopped. So, have you seen something like this hybrid, this capstone rubrics? For me, I really like this rubric because it's comprehensive. It captures what the students should have learned and should be able to do. It's not some rubrics that is, very skimpy and you're not quite sure, whether you give everybody a 4 or you give everybody a 3. You cannot make fine distinctions. But with this kind of rubrics, the marks are going to be very diverse. The marks are going to be stretched out, and then you can actually give the grades more easily and you feel more comfortable. So I'm talking from the measurement perspective. But of course, it's very difficult, right? It's not something that's easy to use. You have to, and this is important because it's such an important project. It carries 6 credit. Therefore, you cannot just evaluate it like that. You must give it due respect. You must give it due thought. So we must pay attention. If we have assignment that carry 40%, 50%, 60%, we need to give it the attention that it deserves. And I've been told that the policy for the university is that if you have an assignment that carries 30%, you need to have a scoring rubric. But for me, even if it carries 10%, if it is a performance assessment, it must have some sort of marking scheme. So it can have a marking scheme like the laboratory report, or it can be in a form of a rubric. It can be in a form of a checklist if it is not very high stakes. So it can take different format, but attention must be given. Due attention must be given. All right, no questions? Just
Prof, I have one question.
okay.
Okay, can our student, do we allow our students to submit assignment multiple times? And after we give them some feedbacks, then the student correct their, they do some corrections, and then they resubmit again the assignment. And then at the end of the semester, most of the students get good marks. Can we do that?
The trouble with that is that, this is more like it's more about scaffolding, it's about helping them to learn. But the thing is that if you give it to all students, that means you give equal opportunity for everybody, then that's fine. But if only certain students, do it, then there's a problem there. It's like we have this concept of speeded test and power test. Okay, a speeded test is a situation where you give a time limit. Let's say 3 hours. Okay, this is our usual exam time. 3 hours. They have to answer all questions in these 3 hours. Now, what it does is that it will differentiate students who have good knowledge and students who students who are very accomplished in learning all those things to actually get a higher score compared to students who are not as accomplished or students who have not acquired that knowledge. Okay, so it helps us with the ranking, with the grading. Now, the second one is the power test, is something where you give them whatever time that they require to be able to fulfill the task. So what's the spirit behind it? Okay, that you want them to achieve, let's say, a certain set standard. Now, is it fair? And the question is that, can we do something like that? I think it's tied to the question of, is it fair? All right. So I think it has to do with the type of the stakes that are involved. Now, high stakes tests usually are related to certification, licensing, and all these things. All right, whether the person has actually acquired the skill. Now, if you see a doctor, you can't wait 1 hour for the doctor to give you the verdict, the diagnosis, right? The doctor needs to identify some symptoms and tell you what's the problem with you, and then give you some medication or some advice about what to do, right? So the purpose of the assessment is very important. Now, sometimes we do that. Sometimes I do that for my students, but I tell them that if you don't do this, you will fail. If you want to have a passing score, this is what you have to do. You have to redo and resubmit. But of course, you cannot get an E for this work. And I'm not even going to give you a B+. The maximum you can get is a B or a pass. That's all. So this, to be fair to the other students who put in the time, the effort to actually get it right the first time. So what do you all think? Do you think that I should revise the way that I'm doing this, or is there a better way? Any comments, suggestion? Because this is something that we face quite a bit, I think. because we are not unmuting everybody. Maybe Dr. Mira, can we unmute?
Sure, Prof. Okay.
Thank you. Oh, you put me as host, eh? I'm the person. Okay. Yes, Doctor. Dr. Muhammad Alwi, you nak say something ke?
No.
Tak ada. In
Tak
medicine,
ada,
how
sir.
do you do? Do you have this sort of situation in medicine?
Yes, we do actually. Where we actually give time. I mean, like you said, usually we allow them if they did not meet the expectation in terms of like time. We do allow them like extension, and then but we don't actually give them like full marks, or I mean A. It'll be pass or fail, because if they fail, they sometimes, for example, like the end of posting exams, if they fail, then they will need to repeat the posting.
Yeah.
So sometimes, because it's a high stake, so it's not a high stakes in a way, like they still become a doctor if they repeat the posting, but it takes like another 2-3 months for them, delay their graduation. So usually we do allow like reattempt.
Yeah, actually, I think what you're trying to do is that to try and get them to have that competency, right? So if you know, most people would acquire that competency in 1 year, let's say by third year they already acquire. So maybe this person has to actually repeat another year, for example, right? So that they will reach that competency level. So you are giving them a bit more time to acquire, kan? Tapi if say for example they still do not acquire that level of competency, therefore they cannot proceed. Betul?
Yes, true.
Yeah, yes, because
And also,
it's important. Yes, doctor?
and also like in some situation, for example, we've got an assessment which we call like it's a kind of like for example, they have to clock a case and they have to present to us. So it's actually an assessment where they got like they'll receive 10 marks total for that assignment, for that particular assessment, but they are given multiple chance. And only for example, if they attempt like 3-4 times, 3-4 presentations, they've met 3-4 presentations, we only took the highest mark for them within the time frame of like few weeks. This is a way, in a way, this is for them as it's a like a formative assessment where we are actually teaching them by using assessment.
Okay, all right. So this is like assessment as learning. You know, the concept of assessment as learning, you have assessment of learning, how much you want to evaluate the learning, the attainment, and then you have assessment for learning. And perhaps this is you're using the assessment as a learning tool. Okay, so yeah, so it depends. That's why I said it depends on the purpose of the assessment, and you know, whether it's high stakes, low stakes. So it all these things count. All right, and the spirit of the assessment itself need to understand. Okay, because at the end of the day, is if someone who's not competent get the same grade as someone who is actually competent, then you are not Dr. Isa, you have to mute. so we are not actually helping the public, you know, we're not helping the people. So this is why we have to be careful. So do you want to take a short break now, or do you want to soldier on?
Prof. Noli, can I say something? I like when you say that we have assessment as the students go on their learning. I think that is also part of what we have is process writing. So as the
Yeah.
students go through so many drafts, and at the end, we expect the students to submit an academic writing which is error-free, but yet there are still some errors. So, uh, what is your take on that? Because for process writing, at the end, it should be when students submit, after going through the feedback from the instructors, the students should be able to write a very good piece of academic writing, but yet, and in fact, it is a good work. In fact, some groups fail to do so. So how do we actually help the students? Because whatever that they learn through the process writing also would help them with their final assessment. And we have given these students, so many chances to improve, to learn from their mistake, yet some fail because we expect students to, with this process, they should be able to achieve, but yet it didn't happen.
Okay, I think, there are few things that we have to consider. Number one, if your target is for them to actually produce a product that is error-free, okay? So you, instead of giving grades, because you can't give grades, is whether pass or fail. All right, so the decision that you can make is whether they have achieved or not achieved. So it can be like a dichotomy, a checklist. Yeah, citations are correct. So you, instead of a scoring rubric, you can have a checklist. You can have a checklist. So and the interpretation would be, let's say, if they meet 8 out of 10, therefore you can give them a pass, or you say they have to fulfill 10 out of 10, then only they can pass. If they don't get 10 out of 10, then they have to revise that, and then they have to resubmit. Now, remember, in our course, we don't have only one assignment. We have multiple assignments. All right, we have a number of assignments, and those assignments actually contribute to the final score, the final mark, the final grade. So this kind of assignment should not carry a lot of weight because it's part of learning. It's part of the learning process. So to encourage them, you can give them like 10 points for this type of assignment. But the points that you want to give that can differentiate the students in terms of their performance, their level of ability, the skills and knowledge, these assessment methods or assessment tasks, you give more marks, because this is what is going to differentiate the A's from the B's and the B's from the C's. Okay, so you cannot treat all assessment in the same way. So hence, the purpose of the assessment is important. Is it assessment as learning? Is it assessment for learning? Is it assessment of learning? So when we want to give grades, for grading, most of the chunk of the weight should actually be given to assessment of learning. So kalau you have, let's say, 100%, maybe assessment of learning, you can have, let's say, 50%. And this 50%, you can have 2 assessment tasks. Satu assignment, satu oral presentation, or satu project, 1 oral presentation. And then the other 50%, then you can make it as assessment as learning, where you give 10%. And then you can have assessment for learning, where you maybe tie into a case-based learning or project-based learning, or you can talk about PBL, so you can tie in your assessment with these other things. So in the end, the accumulation of the different types of methods of assessment and the different purposes of the assessment would, I think, would allow you to differentiate the students at different levels of knowledge and ability.
Thank you, Prof. Yes, we are on the right track. Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah. Yes. Any other questions? Comment? Tak ada. Okay. Maybe Dr. Mira, what do you suggest? A short break or continue?
If everybody prefer to have a break, I think we can have a break first, Prof. Maybe 5 minutes just to,
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
A short break. Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
So did you manage to get your coffee? Okay, now let's talk about how to design the scoring rubrics. How to design the scoring rubrics. I actually have not highlighted the basic steps because I think all of us are familiar with scoring rubrics. But what I'm trying to do is that trying to highlight some things that would actually impact the measurement based on your rubrics. Okay, so things that we're going to look at would be purpose of use, whether it's going to be formative or summative, whether it's norm reference or criterion reference, and then whether it's high stakes or low stakes, or whether it's for pass or fail in terms of grading. So we mentioned this about how much detail that should be put in the rubrics, and then the constructive alignment. Okay. So when we, first thing is that we have to ask ourselves is, what does our assessment hope to achieve? Okay, so we have our course learning outcome. And from the course learning outcome, we also have our assessment methods. All right, and we have to match with that. Okay, so are we interested in a pass-fail, or do we want them to achieve a minimum level? So it's, let's say, for example, if everybody achieve the minimum level, therefore they will pass. There's no sense to give grades. There's no sense to give grade if our purpose is to actually use it as a learning tool that they will attain that minimum level. So it's a pass and fail decision. All right. But if it is for rank ordering, for determining different levels of performances, therefore we want to differentiate. All right, we want to differentiate, and our scoring rubrics must be able to do that. Okay. So depending on the purpose of our assessment and how we want to classify the students, then this would actually determine the task that we give them, the performance or the assessment task itself, and also the scoring rubrics that we will use in the assessment. Okay. Now, for the final assessment, now this is something that is, that we must give attention to, because this is what is most affected by the CMCO, right? Because there's sit-in final examinations are not encouraged, and we are encouraged to use other alternative assessment methods. Therefore, we need to have the tools as well, which include scoring rubrics, rating scale, checklists, so on. Okay, so in the final assessment, this is where it's not meant for assessment for learning. It is meant for assessment of learning. Okay, assessment of learning. We want to differentiate who to give A, who to give B, and so on. All right. Even who to fail. If they have not achieved the competency that is required, then they cannot move forward. All right. So that's the first thing. And then we need to think about the constructive alignment. Okay, this is an example. This is from the course that I am teaching. Now I have 4 learning outcomes. Now the first learning outcome is to explain fundamental principles, purposes of language assessment, utility of traditional and alternative assessment methods in assessing language ability. So I have my delivery strategy, and then these are my assessment methods. I have 10% oral presentation, and the rest is in the final examination. So I have to build a scoring rubric for my oral presentation. Okay, so what am I going to assess? So I have to tag it with the learning outcome. Okay, and why did I select oral presentation? Because if you look at the learning outcome, if you just look at the learning outcome, explain can be written. It doesn't have to be an oral presentation. But if you look at my, in terms of the skills, so I could explain at cognitive level C2, psychomotor P2, affective A3, then I have communicative or communication skill. So that's 3, and then critical thinking 2. So these are domains and skills that I want to assess for this particular learning outcome. All right, that's why, I don't know about other people, but for me, whenever I write my learning outcome, I actually identify the cognitive skill that I want to assess, the affective, the soft skill, I put them all there so that I remember it, and I would then design an appropriate assessment method for it. Okay, so if having a look at that, so explain for cognitive domain is actually C2. Okay, explain, and then it also wants to compare the utility of traditional and alternative assessment methods. So this is definitely C2. And then for the affective domain, explain is A3. Okay. And then for psychomotor, explain is P2. Okay, communication skill. Now look at the communication skill. It says the ability to present clearly with confidence. Now, present clearly can be written, but it says that present clearly with confidence and appropriate to the level of the listener. So therefore, for this, I chose an oral presentation. An oral presentation because of this soft skill. Okay, because of this soft skill. So it is an oral presentation. So this is how I decide on the assessment task. And then I also, when I developed the learning outcome, I really thought about it. How am I going to assess the learning outcome? So this is why I also selected the communication skill. Okay. Then the next one, the next soft skill is critical thinking. The ability to develop and improve thinking skills such as to explain, analyze. So when you want to compare different types of assessment methods, you have to do some analysis. Okay, and you also have to do some evaluation to say why one particular method is better than the other. So this is why I selected critical thinking level 2. So looking at the learning outcome and the aspects that I want to assess, the cognitive aspects, psychomotor, affective, the communication skill, the critical thinking skill, then I have to consider, is it going to be an oral or written task? I have to talk about what would be the content. The content would be then about fundamental concepts, principles, purposes of language testing, and then about traditional and alternative assessment methods, okay, in relation to assessment of language ability. So then I also have to think about in my scoring, before I go to the scoring rubrics, I have to think about whether I want it to be individual or group. Is it going to be an individual assessment or is it going to be group? Okay, if it is for assessment of learning, if you want it to be like a final assessment, I would recommend an individual work because you want to differentiate between individual. But if you give individual work, then you need to make sure that you give them sufficient time to complete, and also you don't make the task too burdensome for one person to actually complete. Okay, so the time allocation, you have to think about the student learning time and all that. And finally, you think about the scoring rubrics. So what is is an oral presentation? You sort of know already what the task is going to be, what are the elements that must be in the scoring rubrics. So now maybe you want to consider, is it going to be a weighted rubric or an unweighted rubric? Are you going to give more attention to the cognitive aspects? Are you going to give more attention on the communication skill? So which are you going to give them the same emphasis? So what is it? Okay, so when you talk about your scoring rubrics, okay, and then of course the SAF, the elements of the Sejahtera academic framework. Okay, so maybe in the critical thinking aspect, you want them to look at it from the Islamic point of view. Let's say, for example, if we were to look at critical thinking, right? If we look at critical thinking, we can look at, okay, difference between traditional and alternative assessment methods in terms of how well they can measure issues of fairness. This is an important issue. okay, which we can relate to the Sejahtera academic framework. So then we have to think about how to incorporate. Okay, so in the scoring rubrics, you have to make sure that you have the cognitive aspect. Maybe the psychomotor is actually the actual presentation. That means, you know, ease of presentation, and then you talk about the actual work that they did with the slides and all those things, and then the communication skill, the critical thinking skill. So these are the elements that you need to have. And then you have to decide, is it going to be a 5-point scale? Is it going to be a 4-point scale? Is it going to be 10-point scale? Okay. And you also have to decide at the lowest point, is it going to start with 50% or is it going to start with 0? Or is it going to start with 40%? Okay. It doesn't mean that the lowest performance should be 0 or should be 1. It can be 40%. It can be then or 50%, because everybody should actually achieve at least 50%. Okay, and then you can differentiate the rest. So this is one approach. Another approach is that the lowest is the absolute lowest. So if they don't do anything, they'll get that 0 at the end of the scale. Okay. So the way that we do the rubrics is that, where do we start? We must always start at the standard, the minimum requirement. Okay, and this is usually the middle of the scale. Usually is that in the middle of the scale that you say this is the level that they must meet. So we decide on that first. Okay, we do the middle portion first, the standard first, and then we look at the exceed. Okay, exceeding expectation, and then we look at not meeting the expectation. Then we fill in everything else in between. So this is how we start the developing the scoring rubrics. So this is another example of the constructive alignment. Now, this one, I took it from one particular site. I'm sorry, I forgot to put down the URL for the website. Now, this one, you find that it has 7 learning outcomes. Okay, so this is for the engineering design course. So the first learning outcome is to identify, formulate, and solve complex engineering problems by applying principles. So it means that they must apply principles of engineering. So it's at application. Okay, it's at application. So they need to, number one, before they apply the principles, they must first identify the problem. Okay, and then they have to solve the problem by using the principles. Number two, they must apply engineering design and come up with solutions that meet the consideration of public health, safety, and welfare. So here you're talking about, you know, responsible research kind of thing. You're talking about ethics in the profession. Okay, so and then you talk about communicate effectively with a range of audiences. So it means that there must be not just a written, it's not just a written assignment. There's some oral presentation has to be there. And then ability to recognize ethical and professional responsibilities. So this is an element of value. Okay, and then you have function effectively on a team whose members together provide leadership, create a collaborative and inclusive environment. So it means that you must assess teamwork, and that teamwork will include leadership, collaboration, elements of collaborative work, and also inclusive environment. It means that you don't leave anyone behind, that everybody is included on the project, everybody have to participate. Okay, and number 6, to develop and conduct appropriate experimentation, analyze and interpret data. So you need to actually also make sure that these criteria are also in your scoring rubrics. And finally, acquire and apply new knowledge as needed using appropriate learning strategies. So what does it mean? So for me, I think that it's also a process thing. It's also a process. It's not just product. Okay, so your scoring rubrics must be able to capture both process and product. All right, so in the alignment of the learning outcomes, you have your learning outcome, then you come up with the assessment task, and then the rubrics that accompany that task. So if you look at the deliverable guidelines, okay, they have a poster, so that poster can cover all those other things, and they also have at the bottom, you can't see that, at the bottom is about a presentation. There is a presentation, and there is also a presentation rubric. Okay. All right. So when we talk about the learning outcomes, okay, when you decide on your learning outcome, you already have identified the taxonomy that you're using. Okay, people in health sciences, because the focus on workplace, the focus on actual practice. So the Miller's pyramid is more suitable, but for many of us, we are actually tied to the Bloom's taxonomy because of KPT rather than by choice. Okay, so this is the example that I showed you just now, how they actually, move from the different elements that are in the curriculum, in the syllabus, how it translates into the scoring rubrics. Okay, so we've seen this already. All right. So another example is, this is another example. Now you find that this particular scoring rubric is a little different. All right, it's less, this one just now, the earlier one is very comprehensive, but this one also, it covers the different elements, and if you notice, it has different weights. Okay, it has different weights. Compliance with instruction, that only carries 5 points. Responsiveness to revision requests. So you see how this is a process. Okay, it's a process that the supervisors give revisions, and then they have to see whether they comply to those requests or not, whether they do those revisions or not. Now, this is an important element. Therefore, you see that the score that is given, it is more than the first one. So that has a higher weight. All right. Then you have a problem definition, design, prototyping, and so on. Okay, so there are also some elements that it says not applicable. So maybe there are certain parts in your scoring rubrics that require that. So the thing is that there is no one set rule for scoring rubric. What is important is that you need to know the purpose of the assessment. Is it of learning, for learning, or is it as learning? And then is it going to be high stakes or low stakes for you to decide on the weight, how much weight you're giving to that particular assignment to contribute to the final marks. And then you have to decide how precise is the measurement, because is it going to be a pass-fail kind of thing, or is it going to be graded using our grading system? Okay. Now there's also a recommendation that in terms of marks, you give it out of 100%, then you can bring it down to 20% or 30%, something like that, because it says that it's a lot easier on you. Okay, so and also I think that the easy part is that it corresponds to our grading system. because our grading system is based on 100%. All right? So there's nothing wrong with that. You know, either you base it on 100% or not. No big deal actually, you know, unless you are not able to make that fine distinctions that you want to make. Okay, recording students' rating scores and identifying strengths and weaknesses. But sometimes, you know, some of us, we thought that, okay, we have the scoring rubrics, we use the scoring rubrics, we give the student the score, but we actually just stop there. So this is an interesting example that has that I found is very interesting because it would also analyze areas of weaknesses and areas of strength. Now, if you notice here, you have the first, this is for, I think this is about related to research, okay? Now, the first part is the literature review. And the second dimension or the second component criteria is about the research study design, and then the performance of the research itself. Okay, if it's a survey research or if it's a lab research, lab-based research, how was the research performed? And then about the analysis conducted, self and peer evaluation. So you see that they also included self and peer evaluation. So this is about goal setting. This is about being able to recognize what's good work, what's not so good work, you know. So it's about empowering the students. And then you have professional presentation. Okay, marks for professional presentation. And then the final report. And then this is the cumulative score. So this one, the final report is actually one of the elements in the for that particular assessment. So you find here they have this item average. You see the item average, the score for each element. Okay. And then here is the outcome. What is the learning outcome that is supposed that this particular assessment is supposed to be able to do? Okay, so students will be able to design, conduct, analyze, and present advanced level legal research. So this is the target, the learning outcome. And you find that if you look at the bottom here, it says areas where students struggle most. Okay, so if you look at the score, you see the lowest score is about performing analysis. It's about professional presentation, and it's also about research study. Okay, it's about research study. So these are, okay, it's about quantitative skills, oral communication, and some principles of science. So these are elements that the students need to work on. So maybe for the next semester or for the next year, the instructor, the lecturer can focus on this element. Okay, so we are giving them marks. At the same time, we are also analyzing areas of strength and areas of weaknesses. So it's not only feedback to the students, but also feedback to the instructor. Okay, so this is, I find that this is one of a good way to present or to communicate the information that we get from assessment using scoring rubrics. Okay. So this one is another way that you can do your to capture the information. Now, if you look at here, it says fail is 40%. So anything 40 and below, this is fail. So you can start your rubric with the fail section and then pass, okay, and then C plus, B minus, B, and so on. So this is another approach. So there are many different approaches on how to design a scoring rubric. find something that is suitable for your purpose, and you know, and find something that is suitable for your assessment purpose. So this is the most important thing. Okay, that's all that I have to share with you. Any questions? Any questions? Any observations? Maybe we can unmute everybody. I can do that. Is that? I can't do that. Yes? Anyone?
Okay, so feel free to unmute. All
Yeah.
participants can unmute the microphone.
Yeah. I hope it has been a useful workshop sharing. It's been useful for me actually, you know, because preparing for this workshop, I actually read few things and then saw some new things that people are doing. Catherine, do you want to say something?
No, just to say hi, and I missed the first hour because I had a class. I hope you have a recording of this that you can share.
I
And
think so.
I feel like I'm back at university, you know, doing this class again. Very helpful. Yeah, it's something that, as you say, we need to go back and read again, yeah, and also apply it later.
Yeah, actually, you know, that things change, you know, things evolve, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, what I knew like some years ago is not the same as what people have moved towards it.
Yes, I recall you going for classes, remember, in USM?
Yeah.
You know, all that time spent, the weekends and all. I do recall that, you know, your sharing of that. And so thank you so much, you know.
You're welcome.
Just basically absorbing everything you're saying. You know, it's the measurement of it to get it right, you know.
No, the thing is that sometimes, you know, when we do the scoring rubrics, we forget the measurement part.
Yeah.
You know, so this is
and
what
it's not easy. It's not easy. You know, you have to like keep doing and redoing and ensure that you capture everything you need to measure.
Yeah. I think that the thing is that if we feel that we are doing a good job, we feel good about it. You know? We feel that, you know, every time we do a good job, we feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of all the readings I'm going to do after this. Thank you so much. Yeah.
It's very nice, you know, because there are now lots of websites and, you know, places to visit and see how people are doing things. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Any questions? How are you doing with your scoring rubrics, everyone? You know, I must share this with you. There was one incident, I think it's permissible to discuss this. It was in the Senate meeting. One case was because, well, you know, the kuliah minutes have to be submitted to the Senate, and the rector actually noticed one particular assessment with the use of scoring rubrics. Okay, so one student, 3 different examiners give 3 very different marks. One examiner gave, I think, about in the teens, you know, one 20 plus, the next one gave a different score. So he was very concerned about it. He said that how is it that you have a scoring rubric and people are interpreting or giving different scores based on the same rubrics? So either there's something wrong with the examiners or there's something wrong with the rubrics, that the rubrics is written in such a way that people can interpret the rubrics in many different ways. You know, so this is why, and especially like rubrics, if students ask for rechecking cannot be done by the lecturer, you know, who've been teaching the course. Rechecking has to be done by another person. So you need to make your scoring rubrics in such a way that it can be easily understood, can be easily applied, and correctly applied by whoever is using your rubrics. So this is why we have this one specific training on just about scoring rubrics. Okay, so I mean, all our rubrics are not perfect. You know, I understand all the measurement aspects of it and all that, but still when I do the descriptors and all that, I tend to miss certain things. So this is why it's important when we evaluate our rubrics, we get another set of eyes. You know, if you have many sets of eyes to look at it, even better. Okay, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong for people to look at what we are doing, because at the end of it is for improvement. Okay, we are not perfect. So don't be shy to share your rubrics with your colleagues. Yeah. Subjectivity, subjectivity in scoring. So there are certain, you know, like say for example, the Rush model, for the many-facet Rush model that handles rater-mediated assessment, it has the ability to adjust for differences in severity. You know, some of us are very lenient, some of us are very strict. So this particular model, statistical model, it can adjust for that, as if all the students are actually marked by one person, you know. But the thing is that because it is statistical and then it requires, you know, additional learning and all that, and possibly some people are not even aware that it exists, you know. So I'm also trying to introduce to the university community that there are tools that we can use to help us to make our assessment better. Other questions? Tak ada ke?
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam, yes.
Sometimes we feel very insecure when it comes to the results at the end of semester. When we present the results, so many students get A's or A minus, and they say the bell curve shape is better than having too many bulk at A or many on the low grades. So actually we use the rubric all the time for the assessment. So is it considered a valid for the assessment even though we have so many students with A or A minus?
I think, you know, the reason why the bell curve is so popular, because the bell curve actually, many things that exist in nature follows a normal distribution, right? So this is the central limit theorem, the theory behind it, about the normal distribution. So most things in this world, if you were to plot the data, you will get a normal distribution. Now, having said that, we are talking in our context, we are talking about selected students, because we select them based on certain academic performance, right? So we actually, from a normally distributed population, we selected those students at the right-hand side of the scale. Okay, we take a truncated sample. That means we take students who achieve 80 above. And from this 80 above, we're going to have a normal distribution for that subpopulation, right? So this is why people are obsessed with this normal distribution. But then looking at the courses that the students take, because some courses, they actually are set in a manner where they only want to see that the student attain a particular standard, you know. So that's why you have, let's say, like one of the courses that we have in education is called action research. And action research, it is something that it's not just product, it's also a process. So if the students actually go through all that processes, so they'll be able to get A. So it is not strange that many students can actually get A, you know. The trouble for our grading system is that A starts at 80% or 75. A starts at 75, right? 75?
80, Prof.
80, okay, A starts at 80. So we cannot differentiate the 80 to the 100. So this is how we lump everybody in the A category. But if you have A minus, A plus, then maybe you can make that fine distinction. You know, so maybe there's nothing wrong with our assessment, but there's something wrong with the scale, the grading system. It's possible, right? But the thing is that, of course, this is why in the course file, you need to put sample of students' work. So if you have the scoring rubrics, you give a sample of the lowest achieved piece of work, and then the average, and then the best. If you put it there, then nobody can actually question you. Or even if you go for, you know, the board of examiners, you can bring those samples and say that, okay, this is how they perform. Tell me if I can give less than A for this. Right? So I mean, these are things that you can do so that you feel comfortable about the grades that you give. Third, then again, there are some people who question this because, you know, our SFS is actually tied to the students' grades, you know. If some students, they think that you are a linear lecturer, therefore you give them high grades, they give you good scores for your SFS. So I think this perhaps also one of the things that worry, you know, certain quarters about why we are giving more A's to students. But I think if we have evidence to support, nobody should question if they deserve it.
Maybe, Prof, the assessment rubric is having lack of validity or reliability, and also use low stakes instead of high stakes, combination of low stakes or high stakes, you know. Is it possible?
It's possible. The thing is that you have to look at, I suggest this, doctor, you look at the students, the product, okay? You look at all the product, and then you look at the A's, and then you see, is there a way that you can differentiate those A's or not? You know? Okay, so maybe this is a low A, this is a middle A, this is a top, you know, high A. And then you look at the characteristics of the low A and the characteristics of the you know, the middle A, or you know, this is how then you can revise your scoring rubrics. You can add more levels. So instead of a 5-point scale, maybe you can have a 7-point scale, or a 8-point scale, or a 9-point scale that can actually help you to differentiate them even better.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. Maybe the more detailed the criteria, I mean the descriptor,
yes,
more accurate.
More accurate, definitely more accurate. That's why when we talk about tests, you know, we talk about tests, reliability is a function of the test length. The longer, the more items you have, the higher the reliability. Okay, it's like when you get information about certain things, the more information you have about something, the more accurate it's going to be. So it works in the same principle. Okay, so you look back at those products, and then you see how much better you can differentiate the different levels of performances, the different levels of the products. Okay.
Sometimes the products depend. I mean, every year we have different kind of product.
It's true. It depends on the cohort also. You know, let's say semester 1. Sometimes, most of the time, semester 1 students tend to be better than semester 2. Right? Because the semester 2 are the leftovers. The semester 1s are the cream de la cream. And the second one is the, you know, so this is why also for every cohort is different. So maybe you can look at them in total and then see how you can actually, you know, maybe we miss certain things that actually can better define the skill.
Yeah, great. I have one more question for us, Prof, because I have seen this type of engineering design, capstone design project guidance, and I can see the score here, combination of 5 and 10. This is my first time actually, Prof, to see this kind of rubric, final design report rubric. So how this works, Prof? Sorry, I'm still learning, Prof.
Yeah, it's okay. The thing for me.
Okay.
The one that I showed earlier. Okay. Go to that slide here. This one. Okay. Now, the thing that I like about this rubric is that number 1, it is comprehensive. It's very comprehensive. It's for a capstone project, so it carries a lot of weight, and it identifies all aspects that are related. So that means the student is assessed on each and every aspect. Okay, so it's comprehensive. It covers the whole domain. And the thing is that if you look at the this section of it, this section here, this section, this one also, you know, you teach the students how to use certain things and all that, and you can actually capture whether they are able to do it or not. Have they selected the right tool? You know, the statistical tool or the tool that they're supposed to use in their design, and also give feedback about what they should actually use. Okay, remove this one, could or should have used. So this one is something that it can be at the end, or it can also be part of a process, you know, that initial evaluation before they submit their final product. Okay, so it's a suggestion. So it is part of learning. All right, and then you have here where you have a series of questions, not descriptors. This is the first time that I've seen it, you know, like this. But I think those questions are appropriate, and I think possibly the descriptors can be varied, you know, it can be very open. That is why they did not have descriptors for it, strict descriptors. Because if it can be too varied, many different things, then having only one set of descriptor, then you may not consider the other things. But if you have it in this format, then you have to evaluate, you know, what is considered as deficient, proficient, or exemplary. So for me, a rubric, you know, just like learning, you know, it doesn't have to be just face-to-face. It can be online. It can be, you know, because I think the main thing is the purpose. If it fits the purpose, if it's able to differentiate the students, if it's able to give you accurate measurement, that is useful. It doesn't have to be only one way of doing things. Betul tak? Sumairan?
Betul, Prof. Yes. Right.
Okay. Yeah. It's just that whether you can explain it to your head department or to the department members, whether they see your viewpoint. You know, just and if at the end of it you apply this and it shows that it can measure accurately, precisely, then you have no problem. Sebab apa kita kata sekarang university we are talking about empowerment, we are talking about flexibility, but with flexibility, empowerment comes accountability. So as long as we are accountable, we can account for the approaches that we take. We can demonstrate the reliability and validity of the tool that we are using. We should have no problem, inshallah.
Okay, Prof. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Prof, can I ask one question?
You can ask two.
Okay, it's a simple question. I think, you know, like in our kuliah, we are using a block system rather than semester system.
Yeah.
So in a semester, we've got like maybe 4 or 5 blocks of students. So and more or less, and at the end of each block, actually we have similar exam. The question will be different, but the similar kind of pattern.
Yeah.
Similar kind of assessment. The issue is, you mentioned about re-evaluating your rubric. After a while, you may have to evaluate. So if we re-evaluate, for example, we complete a block for students, and then we re-evaluate the rubric.
Dr. Muhammad Alwi tak clear.
Oh, tak clear.
Are you walking or somewhere? Hello?
Or
Okay.
better. Okay, like this. So because we are using block system,
Yes.
so if we re-evaluate our rubrics at the end of a block, at the end of the block, we re-evaluate the rubrics, would it be unethical for the student of next block? Because they may question, oh, we are having different rubrics than the previous block.
Okay.
Is there such an issue?
The thing is that, you know, sometimes things change. The field changes. In terms of content, kadang-kadang dia berubah. Okay, so that's part of it. The other thing is that the rubrics, so I don't expect that you're going to have major changes. Review. Okay, if you go through a curriculum review, you change your assessment task, therefore your rubrics will change. All right. So the thing is that as long as the rubric fits the assessment task and fit the learning outcome that you are supposed to achieve, it should be okay, insyaAllah. Dia tak ada masalah ethical kat situ. Mungkin masalah dia, the difficulty would be acceptance. If the students feel that rubric is making their life more difficult, possibly they might think that way. But the thing is that if you, it's like measurement though. In the past, we used a lot of traditional, what so-called traditional based assessment, where we have final sitting examination and all that. But then we change, all right? We go into open book examination, go to alternative assessment and all that. Does it make our assessment unethical? Does it make it less accurate? It doesn't. As long as whatever that we do, all the things that are involved in that assessment is done properly. Jadi bila kita buat rubrics, one other approach to rubric development actually is involving the students. Bila you have rubrics and you discuss with your students about, you know, what are their feedback on it and incorporate as part of the rubrics. This is another approach. But improvement of the rubrics must actually be made, can? it's good if we can get it all done in the beginning. Right from the start, everything is okay, everything is perfect. But most of the time, it doesn't happen that way. So we will have to improve, because we need to have better precision about, in our measurement. So saya rasa in terms of ethics memang tak ada masalah, because even the course content kita tukar, assessment task we change. Okay, so refining the rubrics should be okay. Ada masalah.
Thank you, Prof. That's very good.
Yeah. Any other questions? Maybe we can end.
Assalamualaikum, Prof.
Waalaikumsalam.
I would like to ask if for the rubric, how are we going to assess for the examiner reliability? For example, we have multiple rated.
For your course, which kuliah are you with, brother? Doctor?
Dentistry, Prof.
Dentistry. So you ada berapa examiners?
For example, I have 5 examiner.
Okay. Now, usually I noticed, let's say in dentistry, I was in dentistry for 3 years. In dentistry, you tak jumpa I think.
Yeah, I just knew, Prof.
Okay.
But I heard of you.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, I hope you heard good things. So dia macam ni. Usually what happens is that for one paper, you have different people setting different questions, kan? Sometimes, you have different people setting different questions. And let's say question number 1, lecturer A set that question. Question number 2, lecturer B set that question. So in the marking, lecturer A will mark all the question for the one that she or he set. And lecturer B will mark, that, the second question. This is a common approach that is used when you have multiple people setting different questions and multiple examiners. But let's say clinical work lah, kan, kata clinical lah, in the clinic. So you have all the students doing the same thing. Dia orang semua buat crown, atau dia orang semua buat class 2 punya restoration. Yeah. So how do you and they have to evaluate using the same rubric, right? Kan? So how do you determine that they are evaluating the same way? So that is why when we talk about rater mediated assessment, where you use multiple raters and require the use of rater ni, you kena ada standardization exercise. You must have benchmark, kata macam benchmark essays, atau you kata sample restorations. You cakap, okay, if this is this kind of restoration, they don't cut too deep, they don't cut too shallow, they did it just right, semua sekali semua betul, dia punya carving pun betul semua sekali. Therefore, this should be the grade. So this standardization exercise, it must be done, this training must be done at regular interval. Lepas tu, the other thing is that you look at the score that is given. So the most common way is actually to look at inter-rater reliability. So tengoklah rater agreement. Like your set of scores for let's say 5 students, and the other person set of scores untuk 5 students. So you do a correlation, atau you pakai kappa ke? Kohon kappa, and or you can use the intra-class correlation. So you tengok dia punya agreement between raters. So these are traditional methods of checking for agreement between raters or among raters. But the trouble is that most of the time you don't do it. Betul tak?
But I'm when I'm doing the the analysis for the consistency. But for example, for like with the rubric, we have a lot of section, right? For example, 1 to 5. Is it we can, for example, we can samely consistency between the raters between the rater for the among the five specific different section for the rubric.
Yeah. What you can do is that you can assign one section for one examiner. Maksudnya, but the trouble is that kalau the sections are interrelated, kalau dia interrelated tak boleh. You can't do that because the examiner would have to look at all the different sections. But if the sections can be standalone, you can do it in such a way that one examiner look at one section only, another examiner look at another section. Jadi you have better consistency that way. Dia macam kata, like say your examination, is a MEQ, katalah MEQ kan, modified essay question. So in your MEQ, you have 3 questions. So question number 1, one person mark all question number 1. Another person mark all question number 2. That way, you have better consistency rather than one examiner mark all. Okay? Tapi macam MEQ tu, dia tak susah sangat sebab dia punya answer scheme is quite detailed and the answer scheme is quite tight tau. It's very difficult to have different interpretation of the answer scheme. But if it is, let's say, clinical, mungkin expectation might be different from one lecturer to one clinician to another clinician. Betul?
Yes, Prof.
Yeah, so the standardization though, memang it has to be done at regular interval to just check that we are actually having the same standards.
Thank you, Prof.
I hope
the
it
explanation.
Okay. But I think that if you're scoring rubrics, memang can clearly differentiate between different levels of performances, have all the criteria and properly worded. Inshallah, we will not have much problem. Okay.
Okay, Prof.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions before we end? I think Dr. Mira, there's no more questions. Dr. Isa, who's helping with this? Dr. Mira, yeah.
I'm here, Prof.
Yes, Dr. Isa. I don't think there are any more questions. And I'm check pun tak ada questions ke apa?
No more, tak ada. Yes, tak ada.
Okay, all right. So I hope that everybody have managed to get to the attendance name, and also we would appreciate if you do the evaluation because we do want to continuously improve our training sessions. And I thank you for your participation and for staying throughout the workshop. And you know, someone said to me some time ago that sometimes we are worried about sharing what we know because we are afraid of maybe we make some mistakes. And this person told me that, you know, don't worry, mistakes tend to correct itself. So it means that if there are any mistakes, you know, probably you will come across something that would actually help to rectify that. So I apologize if, you know, I've said anything that may not be palatable to, you know, may not be suitable. I wish you all the best. You can always reach out to us if you need help. Okay. So thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Let us close with Surah Wal-As and Tasbih. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Waalaikumsalam.
Okay. Bye, Catherine.